The intoxicating aroma of goat meat is one of the most familiar scents wafting through Lagos Nigerian streets. But one man had this odd comments to say about its flavor profile. There's no difference between the taste of eating goat meat and human flesh. His cannibalism supposedly began in 1992 when he regularly was devouring human meat as entire meals. Neighbors would see him gnawing on what looked like typical roasted meats, kind of like goat meat, having absolutely no idea of this sick truth. Travelers in Lagos would unknowingly walk across this overpass where a kitchen underneath them was preparing feasts made of multiple victims. Both fresh and decomposing body parts would eventually be found in his tire junkyard he called home, among other peculiar items. How would you honestly react if you discovered that your neighbor was butchering and cooking human flesh? A cannibalistic neighbor who allegedly had ties with the protected elite. While little is known about his victims, it's a case that generated significant public outcry for change and awareness. This is the story of Clifford Orji, Nigeria's first cannibal serial killer who hid in plain sight. Hey listeners, real life can be heavy and these stories reflect that, so please check the show notes for specific content warnings related to this episode and for links to support resources. Now, Clifford Orji was born around 1966 in Enugu State, Nigeria. If you know anything about Enugu, you know it's in the southeast with mostly people of the Igbo tribe. And Clifford was Igbo too. Just a year after he's born, the Biafran War breaks out. The trauma from that war hit every single generation. But other than that, we don't know much about Clifford's early childhood or family for that matter. What we do know is he didn't stick around in Enugu. Fast forward into his adulthood, the war is over and Clifford moves to Lagos, probably chasing new opportunities in the big city. In Lagos in the 90s, it was a time. According to those who actually lived there during this decade, life wasn't all that bad. The city buzzed with energy, food, people hustling left and right. There were cool public hangouts. The music scene was on fire, and Nollywood movies really started to take off. But with all those highs came some serious lows. Let's not forget, Nigeria in the 90s was also a time of political oppression, ritual killings, and the persistent sense of fear. Like you could just literally disappear for saying the wrong thing. The streets, yeah, not safe either. People would wake up to news of dismembered bodies. They were victims of ritual murders. And those stories about people getting snatched off the street and dragged into ritualist den, they weren't just stories. Sometimes it was your neighbor, and you never knew if it would be you next. And as art imitates life, Nollywood was like a mirror of all that anxiety. Those movies weren't just for entertainment. They were basically documentaries of everyone's worst yet plausible nightmares. Remember Blood Money? The 1997 Nigerian melodramatic morality tale basically focused on the cult phenomenon of money cults, which many Nigerians were familiar with at the time. I had no business watching that as a kid, but you already know, as kids do, I still peeked a little bit here and there at it. The fear was real, and Clifford Orji was right there contributing to the mayhem, showing everyone just how dark things could get, but in real life. Originally, Clifford was like everybody else who's just living in this vibrant Oshodi market, one of West Africa's busiest shopping destinations back then. And he was woven into the city's fabric, just interacting with people daily and selling razor blades as a merchant. Then he honed a passion for something completely different, aspiring to become a shaman or native doctor, also known as a dibia, meaning in the Igbo language, a master of medicine or of knowledge. There are different types with different roles, but overall, they're known as healers and custodians of deep ancient wisdom and knowledge. Now, for Clifford, this path made sense. After all, he claimed to have deep connections with spiritual beings, so there you go. Following this milestone, he rebranded his name to Chinyalu, which means God has given me. To say he was undeserving of such a meaningful name is the understatement of the year, okay? So we're just gonna keep referring to him as Clifford because, yeah, think that's fair. To this day, his pivot from being a merchant to a native doctor remains a mystery. But my guess, it's easier to deliberately deceive people into buying his healing services than what he was doing before. Eventually, Clifford settles under an overpass of the Oshodi Isolo Expressway near what's been reported as the Toyota bus stop. And basically, it's just this area that's like in the heart of Lagos, full of life, commerce, and movement. Because Clifford even claimed that he was a victim of a shady group of associates, right, who basically owed him nearly 700,000 naira. So it's possible that maybe they weren't exactly appreciative of Clifford trying to collect his debt. So this resulted in Clifford finding a home, according to him, underneath this bridge away from their proximity. Because this area was a pretty consistent stream of people and traffic, one would probably not expect anything outrageously abnormal here. But, of course there's a but, this was where people started to notice Clifford's erratic behavior. If he noticed anybody, I'm talking anybody, approaching his makeshift home, he would act insane. Unsuspecting people would mind their own business, kind of just thinking to themselves, maybe I can go to the marketplace, grab some agege bread before I get home. And then suddenly, a deranged, scruffy, half-naked man would appear charging at them. Naturally, folks started to just avoid him altogether once this became known. But you see, the now 30-something-year-old Clifford was a little different. Whether or not you gave him eye contact, or if you were even just a foot too close to his shack, oh yeah, he'd try and chase you down, waving a stick at you and babbling incoherently. But here's the thing, all that erratic behavior was just a cover-up. People eventually stopped paying this man any attention, so no one really had any idea what Clifford was actually up to underneath that bridge. At least not until one day, he made the mistake of leaving his home unsupervised. It was super early, so early that it was still dark out, just before the sunrise. So birds aren't even awake yet, okay? It's February 3rd, 1999, and Clifford leaves his home to run some errands. No idea what those errands were, but meanwhile, this guy Joseph Bello is just vibing by himself, walking home after a night-long church vigil, humming some of his favorite gospel tunes. And after a long night like that, I'm sure all he wanted to do was just get home, maybe get some food, and crash. Now, he passes by Clifford's place, again, minding his business, until he hears something. A woman's voice. And not like a, hey, help me type of plea. It sounds more like someone who's totally drained, barely awake even. Yet they're singing. Wouldn't you be curious? Joseph was, and he follows this sound, and it's coming from behind this sketchy bush area underneath the overpass. As he gets closer to this makeshift home built out of used car tires, this super gross burning smell hits him like a ton of bricks, like the kind of smell that makes you question your life choices. I mean, it was bad. Something in Joseph's gut tells him to go check it out. So what does he do? He peeks inside of this man's home, and y'all, literal nightmare fuel beyond like your imagination, okay? What does he see? Human limbs. Yes, I'm talking like arms, legs, roasting over a fire in this deep, giant pot. Joseph just stands there, frozen, like he couldn't even believe his eyes. What do you even do? Joseph couldn't even believe his eyes, so he bolts and starts to tell everyone he can find about what he just saw. The news travels fast, so in no time, there's already a whole crowd starting to surround Clifford's shack. I mean, traffic ended up even getting so bad because people were literally abandoning their cars off of the streets nearby so that they could catch whatever was catching everybody's attention, right? And they're pushing, they're shoving, breaking through the tire walls. And what do they find? Severed feet, rib cages, chunks of flesh, and a freshly decapitated head. As the sun comes up, the crowd doubles in size. Everyone's chattering, standing shoulder to shoulder. Finally, Clifford himself strolls up, and he's totally caught off guard because he's like, wait a minute, These people weren't here before. Oh, wait, that's my house that they're all peering into. He notices this and tries to make a run for it, but nope, he gets caught. Okay, they drag him back and flip his place upside down. And just when you think it can't get any more disturbing, it still does, because they find a sickly, tiny, gaunt woman literally stuffed inside a tire. Like, she had to be so small to fit in a tire. Her name was Awawu Lawal. She was barely alive, completely starved, and it turns out it was her voice that Joseph Bello heard in the hours prior to her discovery. Remember the singing? Yeah, that's why it was so faint. If she hadn't made any sound at all, she probably would have been Clifford's next meal. The crowd's horrified and furious, wondering how long had she been trapped in here, and they were so pissed. They started to beat the crap out of Clifford and basically busting up his nose and lip until finally the police show up. Now, Awawu is rushed to the hospital and managed to tell authorities that she was drugged, essayed, and tortured by Clifford. But sadly, she falls into a coma and unfortunately passes away just a few days later. And if you thought that was it, think again, because the police searched Clifford's place and they find so much inside of this man's kitchen. There's a bucket, rusty frying pans, a bowl full of human bones, firewood, rice, yam, and typical Nigerian ingredients, knives, a check for 80,000 naira. Then there's 500,000 naira in cash and a GSM cell phone. Okay, so we're going to talk about all that. Hold on, it's a lot. I know that's a lot. Now, what's crazy is, why does he have all of that? Well, let me jump especially to that phone, because that was really different, okay, for someone like him to own. Think of those old school Nokia phones that would basically like knock you out if you threw it at somebody. Yeah, that's what a GSM phone was. Back then, those GSM cell phones were somewhat like the new iPhones in the 90s, and only the super rich had them. So how on earth did Clifford get his hands on that? And why was there a police officer's helmet sitting on top of a pile of bones? I mean, the questions just keep piling. People start asking questions. Even the most skeptical Nigerians couldn't deny the rise of reported ritual killings. So people wondered if Clifford's activities were linked to spiritualists. Just a few years before, a child's head was found in someone's car. So this speculation really wasn't too far of a reach. Then there was a question of, who the hell is he calling? Like, who was he working with? He wasn't exactly rolling in cash or gadgets before, so what changed? Next, let's talk about that $80,000 check. Okay, because in 1999, minimum wage was about 3,000 naira a month. Just put that in perspective. So how does a guy like Clifford end up with a check worth over 25 times the minimum wage, for crying out loud? It just doesn't make sense. Could it have been a payment for something sinister, or did he just steal it? Because, get this, okay? What's strange is that they could have easily figured this out by simply referring to the check's sender and receiver written on it, right? Like, every check has that. But several articles mention that those details were never shared with the public. For no media, police report, or official source to share such valuable information in a case like this says a lot. And it supports why people grew suspicious about potential corruption happening internally. So to this very day of this recording, that mystery has yet to been solved as to who it belonged to and who it was for. But we're just cracking the surface, because Clifford had a friend, Tahiru Aliyu, who the crowd suspected he was working with. Tahiru was also mentally unwell and a pathological drug addict, according to police reports. Detectives later learned that he fell out with his landlord in Lagos around the same time he lost his job as a night guard 2 years before. So his unstable history gives us some idea on how he eventually was driven to, unfortunately, live an unstable life, started doing drugs, and petty theft. But he certainly topped himself by adding this to his resume. So the crowd does what they do, and they tear down Tahiru's place as well. Now they discover this unbelievable scene, a 10-foot deep pit barricaded with used tires, filled with clothes and bones. Every part of the human body was there except for the skulls. And the police searched for days, but according to them, due to their limited forensic skills, they couldn't ID the victims found in the pit. Also, they retrieved sophisticated arms and ammo from Tahiru's home, which again is another alarming discovery. The lack of information must have been incredibly frustrating for both detectives and locals who just wanted answers. So how did Clifford lure his victims? According to him, he used his spiritual healer persona, tricking people into entering his home before kidnapping them. And I know they say don't judge a book by their cover, but this man looked absolutely terrifying, just especially to trust being alone in his home. But in Nigeria, regardless of what they look like, people just trust traditional healers, oftentimes even more than doctors, especially if they can't afford hospital care. If you're familiar with this side of Nigerian culture, then you may be aware of the exploitation that comes with it, because people like Clifford will closely target vulnerable populations and those suffering from mental illnesses, sadly leaving many people untreated and left with worsening conditions. Now, as someone who is a big advocate for mental health care, it honestly is so devastating. And the reality speaks volumes about the need for change. So while I respect these decisions to a degree to see spiritual healers, people everywhere deserve access to quality medical and mental health care. There's an old but really interesting BBC documentary about this from a journalist who investigates the treatment of disabled people in Ghana, which I know is a totally different country, but it seems to have a lot of parallels to the way that, unfortunately, a lot of African societies treat those with mental disabilities. And it's awful. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes, but be warned, it is a hard watch. And Clifford is no different from those in the documentary. He twisted people's trust and basically preyed on the most vulnerable, those who needed help, not terror. Clifford was backed into a corner at this point, and he knew there was no getting out of this. So he only had one option left, and that was just to come clean. So he claimed that most of the victims were young women. He'd hypnotize them by blowing on their forehead, luring them into his place in a trance-like state. Now, in some ritualistic practices, ashes or powders are typically blown from their mouth onto a potential victim's face. Once targeted, it's said to compel you to do whatever this person instructs you to do, which, mind you, I'm sure there are all different types of ways these powders can be used depending on the reason why you're using them as a spiritualist. But in this particular case, that is how Clifford said he used it. This is a silly example, but if you ever come across Nigerian TikTok, then you probably know about this trend. Basically, there's this guy who goes around messing with aunties and uncles in public places, blowing some type of powder onto them or pretending to, and basically he gets their freak out on camera, which obviously generates a lot of views.
Yes.
They sent me to come get you.
From where?
Africa. Ile. He's walking. Calm down. Auntie, calm down. Auntie. Is it prank?
Their reactions, despite how hilarious they were, came from their awareness of practices like this. So I just share that because I need you to understand there are a lot of people who do believe in this stuff. And I know being in the West might disconnect you from that reality. So just be open-minded to the fact that, yes, even though we don't see that here in the different parts of the world in the diaspora, it's very real and present to those who are back home. Clifford continues to say that after rendering them vulnerable with this powdery substance, he would essay them until they went unconscious before slaughtering and roasting them. Clifford claimed he killed over 3 people, primarily young hawker girls with permed hair. I don't really know why he preferred the girls with relaxed hair, but regardless. Oh, and by the way, a hawker girl is basically described as a young girl who sells a variety of goods, typically like traveling on foot with a tray on her head. And while transactions occur in public spaces as an everyday livelihood, it also poses a huge risk for their safety. Clifford knew this and used their vulnerability to his advantage. He and his follower, Tahiru, would basically lure the girls to their lair, pretending to buy clothes. It was a careful strategy since, brute force would basically draw way too much unwanted attention. Once they were inside the home, they would drop the act and do what they wanted with them, before, of course, murdering them. Clifford described the murderous partnership, how Tahiru was more of the hunter, while he played the butcher. It's sickening. Now, Tahiru's method of luring victims, on the other hand, was by using his commercial motorbike as a service, so that these young women would basically land right into their trap. Tahiru remained mostly silent compared to Clifford just throughout the interrogations and during his time in custody. So we barely hear a lot from him. A lot of our information largely comes from Clifford and other witnesses. As the truth caves in, the story grows even darker. In his confession, Clifford said he wasn't working alone. I mean, we know about Tahiru, but there was even more. Aside from his partner Tahiru, he said there was about 10 people helping him handle these jobs. His associates would basically claim specific body parts and leave whatever they didn't want for him. Oh, and that Czech and Nokia phone he had, Clifford told authorities that powerful, well-off people gifted those to him. But again, who are these people and what could they have been using these body parts for in exchange, right? Like none of it's making sense. Now, his neighbors did often see luxury cars parked under the bridge near his home, but up until that point, they never thought much of it. But now they're making those connections. Clifford admitted to contributing to the underground trade of human body parts, a trade that was basically known for religious or sometimes medicinal ceremonies. Like, people have literally been caught digging up bodies from cemeteries to sell those parts. So then it just makes you wonder, like, were all of these gifts given to him because of his collection of human heads that he was basically offering? Clifford identified the only freshly severed head that was found belonged to a market seller from Awawu State. Besides that, unfortunately, all we know about her is her first name, Inobong. Just for perspective, let's say you wanted to drive from Awawu State to Lagos, which, I mean, back then, I don't think it would have been as simple as that, right? There probably was a lot of stops. But let's say if you did, it's about a 12-hour drive. So it was definitely a far distance away from anyone she knew in her hometown. But this detail reveals more about how Clifford targeted his victims very carefully and intentionally. He would purposely find people who traveled far away from their homes, assuming that their families wouldn't be as likely to search for them, being that they're so far away. At least not immediately. Let's just put all of that to the side for a moment. How could he have gotten away with this for nearly 8 years? Well, for one thing, since the bodies weren't left to go putrid in a grave, cooking and consuming was the only way the public wouldn't catch on. Spices and other aromatic ingredients helped mask the odor just a little bit too. As deranged as he was, even he knew that the smell of cooked humans might be detected. So he'd just scare off anybody who came too close. And that was how he hid what he was roasting. A neighborhood spare parts dealer who lived near Clifford's home regularly saw him just devouring this meat. I mean, the act itself seemed harmless, so you can imagine his absolute shock after the news got out. The entire time, it wasn't any ordinary meat that he was eating, but a diabolical diet that no one ever saw coming. Now, on the same day he and Tahiru were caught by this crowd, they both were basically arrested and taken to Makinde police station in Oshodi. Now, Clifford was held in custody on December 7th, 2000, after being brought in for murder in the high court. Now, they were only charged with the murder of Awawu Lawal. What's very shocking, but also not shocking, is how the state commissioner of police thought they were under some type of spiritual attack and needed a psychiatric evaluation. But each hospital rejected Clifford over and over again. When he did finally get seen by a psychiatric hospital, the doctor and authorities, they just wouldn't reveal their findings for ethical reasons, despite the case being of extreme public interest. In the end, neither Clifford nor Tahiru were ever sent to a trial. Clifford remained stuck in this legal limbo for about 13 years, but we aren't sure about Tahiru's last known whereabouts or status. And this was primarily due to them appearing as if they were mentally too unstable to be tried. And sadly, for the years following their arrest, it became very safe to assume that police just abandoned the case. The Lagos State Police Commissioner told the press, "I think the case is over because since I came, I've never heard anything about Clifford Orji." But it wasn't like they didn't have ample evidence to prosecute the two cannibal serial killers. So I mean, what gives? They didn't even bother doing forensic testing on Clifford's unfinished human meat that they basically confiscated from his kitchen. And what's worse is they gave the impression to the public that they would do these things. Anyway, at some point, Clifford was transferred to Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. And let me just tell you, he had a time at that prison in his sad little life. Nigerians know about this prison because of its terrible reputation. Kirikiri prison is just one you don't ever want to go to or be caught dead in even. It's notorious for overcrowding, which doesn't really help for the appalling living conditions or alarmingly high death rates. Don't expect even the most basic medical care there either. There's this terrible story of this minor who was falsely accused and imprisoned there by the police. Then he was essayed by inmates multiple times a day, every day for a few months. Those are the kind of stories that come out of this place. And Clifford's odds at getting out were pretty slim because according to Noel Aliyewan, who was a deputy comptroller of prisons, there were 554 people in prison who were just awaiting trial for several years. Just like Clifford. After Deputy Noel visited Clifford, he shared with the press that Orji's health is getting worse. He's gone completely mad, vomiting and even defecating without restraint, and is naked most of the time. I mean, it doesn't sound too different from how he was before, but with his inability to get his case heard, Clifford further descended even quicker into madness. Despite Clifford making himself out to be insane, some Nigerians didn't believe that he ever really was, and that he was just using it as a facade all along. But we'll never truly know because those results were never released to the public once he got psychologically evaluated. But it did seem like he knew how to dodge facing prosecution, at least to some degree. Maybe there was someone counseling him on what to do, like one of his clients, or maybe he just knew better. We see it time and time again. Interestingly, his safety was called into question while being held in custody. Now, many insisted Clifford be taken care of in hopes of avoiding a pattern of offenders like him mysteriously dying in custody before their trials. The 1996 case of a man who beheaded an 11-year-old was widely discussed by residents who suspected police of foul play in his death as a cover-up. Because a child murderer told police he regularly shipped severed heads to Nigerian elites for rituals. But of course, he died before he could expose their identities. Yeah. Because of this, Nigerians expressed that Clifford must survive his time in custody to be properly tried in a court of law. Otherwise, they would absolutely hold the police responsible. Because many people honestly believed his story about having high-profile clients. And because of that, there needed to be a proper investigation made to track them all down, no matter how big this web spans. Now, this next part seems to always be left out about Clifford Orji's story. It never ceases to amaze me how some women can find the most deplorable human beings attractive because, yes, Clifford Orji supposedly had an admirer. Her name's Nkiru, and she's really a reporter, but she faked being his sister just so that she could visit him before she allegedly fell for this guy. This was during Clifford's time in custody in Ikoyi prison. When they first met, Clifford sits right next to her on a bench and reaches out to caress her arm. He was immediately shooting his shot. He goes, "Immediately I set my eyes on you. I had a feeling we were meant for each other. The same blood runs through our veins." Pause. Isn't that like incest? I'm gonna keep going. I don't know what. In fact, if I get out of this place, I won't hesitate to make you my queen, my only woman. She felt like he's not really as disheveled as he appeared in those pictures from the press. But like, Of course, he wouldn't be because he's in prison now, and they're probably forcing him to establish some hygiene routine of some kind. Like, they're not going to have him doing what he was doing before. Absolutely not. Because this wasn't the Kiri Kiri one, mind you. But I digress. Because of his love that he had for Nkiru, he insisted that he was telling her the truth about how he could never hurt humans, especially eat them, and just flat out denied ever being a cannibal. Oh, brother. The meat in his kitchen? Those were just cats. Yeah, that's what he said. They were just felines. He said, I saw a piece of human flesh on the expressway this one time. I picked it up and roasted it, but when I tasted it, I didn't like it. So I spat it out and threw away the remaining. Nkiru, you know I like you, so I won't lie to you as I have done other people. Please believe me. He really said that. Like, I'm sorry, but just the fact that he admitted he lied to other people is kind of insane to me. Like, what did you lie about? Like, can you explain? Can you expand? I wish she had done her job and just got more out of this guy, because this didn't seem like a very productive meeting at all. But this bizarre fatal attraction of Nkiru's was thankfully short-lived, so it didn't go anywhere. Good for her. Eventually, Clifford sued the Attorney General on April 26, 2012. He argued that his drawn-out detention was unconstitutional and violated his rights to liberty. He sought to be released unconditionally from prison and would need 1 million naira in damages. This was a ballsy move, considering that the Attorney General in Nigeria holds a powerful position. But this suit eventually got dismissed. Why? Well, if you remember, Clifford's health was deteriorating very quickly, on top of having his mental health issues. So it didn't really matter that he tried to sue, because just 4 months after filing that lawsuit, Clifford Orji died in his sleep in prison on Friday, August 17th, 2012. It's strange because some sources say it was from gastroenteritis, others say it was from natural causes or a cardiac arrest. The unanswered questions in this case continues to pile up, I'm telling you. But this wasn't a moment to even really celebrate, right? Because he never revealed any of the names of his clients, customers that he was speaking of before he died. Not even one person. So his lawsuit got tossed out, and this shouldn't be much of a surprise, but not a single friend, family member, or loved one came to claim his body. And oddly, nothing had been heard from his partner, Tahiru. It's like he just disappeared into thin air after originally getting arrested. Aside from one interview he does with a reporter, there really wasn't a lot of information that came from him as far as updates go. So there was really like a lot of speculation, right, about this whole thing, because it's like he was a pretty big piece to the puzzle and now he's nowhere to be found. Immediately following Orji's death, people basically treated that whole area near his former home as a tourist site, because of course they did, right? And even selling pictures of the human remains that they found that day he was caught, which is like absolutely abhorrent. And some even questioned if Clifford was really dead or if this was some big cover-up from the bosses at the top. Comments circulated like, where's the proof? Who buried him? And are they sure it was really him? He's probably out. It's been said that the police force allegedly helped Clifford's customers behind the scenes for several reasons. For one, after the case went public and they discovered the check, no one thought to dig deeper to find who wrote it, as I mentioned before. Surely they should have pursued a lead from that alone. After all, Clifford admitted that he wasn't operating solo in this organ harvesting service, yet no one checked his phone call logs to determine who he was contacting or something. So maybe they just wanted to lock him up for years before he started singing, and then he died. Clifford's home under the Oshodi Expressway remained a dangerous site for everyone, even 24 years after his arrest. A gardener working under the bridge told the Guardian newspaper that crime there was only worsened over the years. Women get assaulted and men get robbed at gunpoint. Several anonymous stories circulate about this area being incredibly unsafe. People are now warned to just stay away, especially after it gets dark, which is probably for the best, honestly. Many questions remain unanswered, one being why organ harvesting is a thing in Nigeria in the first place. And I would go as far as to say it's prevalent everywhere, if we're being honest, but the answer in this area lies with two things: money and ritualistic ties. Several reports have been made on organ harvesting cases in Nigeria. It preys on the desperation of those in need of transplants, often in wealthy nations, while exploiting the vulnerability of those living in poverty. Arrests of wealthy individuals for these type of crimes are very rare, unless the crime happens outside of Nigeria, which is honestly so upsetting to hear about. Similar to the case that happened with a Nigerian politician who was arrested in the UK for plotting an organ harvesting exchange. Let me know if you want me to cover that case in a future episode, because yeah, that one had a lot of people talking. On the other hand, you have ritualists who may kill for various reasons. Some believe there are business owners who've basically done so for overnight business success. Meanwhile, politicians do it for their campaign success in elections or for protection. This is where I check out. Like, this is where I'm like, you know what? We're not gonna deal with that. We're just not gonna even dive into it, because I don't play about this stuff. Like, I don't. This case became a national obsession, and the media just went wild over it. News outlets all over the country basically covered every single detail, sparking intense debates and discussion among the public. So on one hand, you have people that really feel strongly on how the justice system failed by having his crimes and Tahiru's crimes go unpunished. And then on the other hand, you have people that really truly believed Clifford was faking his mental illnesses the entire time just to evade accountability. Because the sheer brutality of his crimes, as we know, just shocked the nation, causing disbelief that such horrific acts could occur in a bustling and ever-evolving city like Lagos. Which, like, yeah, like that would definitely have me questioning some things too. What's really heartbreaking is this case left me truly wanting to know about who these victims were before they fell prey to Clifford Orji and his partner. Unfortunately, that information probably will never be revealed beyond what we know of those victims today. What do you make of Clifford Orji's case and his claim that he was working with powerful people? I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments. Please stay safe wherever you are listening from, and I hope to see you back here for the next episode of Murder Mystery Motherland. If you have any cases that you would like for me to feature on the next episode, please let me know in the form that'll be linked in the show notes below.